Hello to the April. Hey, hello. Welcome to the April 10th, 2026 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could simply ask questions in the live chat field or send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner may soon not be possible with a number of questions as they come in, but we will go through all the questions chronologically as asked. So if you don't get a response immediately to the question you ask, if we could avoid asking or repeating the same questions repeatedly, that would be appreciated. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, or other Steinberg programs, what version numbers, if you're running Cubase 13, 14, 15. Also, if you're running which operating system, such as Mac OS or Windows, that information is helpful. We should have an index of all of the topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field. Several hours after the live stream ends, I usually take a quick dinner break and work on the index. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you can go to cubaseindex.com. We want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that site. We have two people that serve as moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K. They're not Steinberg employees, but they do it to make it a better community experience, and we appreciate their efforts. We also give a special round of gratitude to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information that's available that's really beneficial to the Steinberg community. So different links, presets, tutorials, and info. So check that out if you haven't. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work with Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products. And I'm the host today. I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C. area in the United States, in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so we have Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. Him and his cat Buddy are waving a paw hello to my cat Steven, Stella, and Mia, and other pets that are nearby. We have Class checking in from Malmo, Sweden. It's Jazz Dude posting a link for FX Modulator preset. All right. We have Terry Gray. Great to see you joining us from Minnesota. All right. We have Jabalin Imalangu. Just says, Dear my Cubase family, hope you're all doing well. This is JB from South Africa. We have Stefan joining from Sweden. VS Terranova joining from Amsterdam. We have Eddie saying hello. We have Vince as Flyv from Winnipeg. We see Jazz Dude on. All right. We see Uno Memento joining from Finland. Jason Sykes in South Yorkshire, England. All right, we have Beverly Beatty joining from Vancouver. We have Cliff Scherer in Germany. All right, so we have Nico from Finland as well. All right, and we have Witty Music from Nashville. All right, and we have Benson Mazan joining from South Africa. Let's see if we get some questions coming in. Give it a minute. If not, we will get to some of the questions that were mailed in. Everyone's getting all, and we see that Jazz Dude has shared a link with the latest Cubase 15 sale. All right, we have Matteo Fiorenzato joining from Italy. Thanks for joining and being on today. All right, I saw this in the last live stream. Question was how to automate direct routing. All right, so one of the things that we touched on the last live stream was, direct routing. So let's say if we're going to have maybe like some drums here and we want to do parallel processing on our drums. So a lot of people, when we do parallel processing, so I've taken all of these drums and I put them into a new folder track with group. So let's see if I get my mouse to cooperate here a little better. So when we come over here, we can move selected tracks to now a new folder track with group channel. Now, we also wanted to, so let's say if we want to do parallel processing and automate the parallel processing on our drums. So what I could do now is I'm going to come over, I'm going to add a group track. So say, okay, let's come right over here. I'm going to add in our group track. And when we add this group track, I want to send it out to my main stereo out. Okay. So, and we'll call this group our parallel. Okay, so we'll have our drums going here. Now what we want to do is in the mixer, we're going to actually send this out to what we call direct routing. So when we go to our direct routing, if you don't see it, go to your setup sections. And now at this point, you can make sure that you have direct routing enabled. And direct routing just allows us to do some more complex routing. Now this could also work in conjunction with this little setting here where we may want to say direct routing summing mode on. So if you want to send this to multiple destinations, so I'm going to take my particular tracks here, and let's say I want to take all of my drums, and instead of just sending them to the main group here, I'm going to take these tracks, and we're also going to, so we look at the routing here at the top. We can see that these are all going to the multi-drum, but when we go to our direct out, I'm going to select all of my drum tracks. And I'm going to activate the Q link. So we could just turn on Q link or hold down Alt or Option plus Shift. And in the direct outs, I want to also send this to, I'm going to choose to come over here. And let's send this all to our multi-drums. And then let's send them all to the parallel group. All right, so right now we have our drums going into their own folder with group track and to parallel. So let's say I want to do like kind of a squash compression here. So we'll do like typical parallel processing, but we wanted to maybe automate this process as well. All right, so say we'll bring up this folder, this group. So if we want to automate, let's say as we come to a particular section of the song, we could just choose to automate all of the tracks. So I'm going to come over here. Let's enable automation. So let's say we're going to start off without the parallel group on. So now if I come here, We can now automate our parallel processing. So if you want more for the chorus, and now as we go back and play, so we can just completely automate the routing. So this could also be used if we have side chains on particular devices. We could automate side chains for different parts of the song, or automate parallel processing for different songs. So you can automate the direct routing. So this could go to sidechain inputs. It could also go directly into parallel processing, and we could do all that directly just right here and automate those changes within your particular mix if you wanted to. All right. Jump back to, so we have some live questions snuck in. Okay. Okay, so reading through comments. All right, so Witty Music asks, can you change the color of tracks and events for multiple tracks at once in one click? So yeah, it could depend. So let's say if we have a number of tracks, so we'll just create an empty project here. All right, so one of the things is to make sure that you don't have a color that's already been assigned to an event. So let's say if I drag over these multi-track files. So I'm not sure if here, or I'll just come over here. So let's say I have a number of tracks and we want to change, we're going to record all of these particular tracks here. Let's see if I have my let me just give it a quick input bus. Okay, so now when I go to record, so let's say these are all assuming the track colors. Okay, so now that I haven't colorized the particular event themselves, so we see that these automatically carry the track colors. So I'm going to select all of my tracks. Just select the top one, hold down Shift, select the bottom. Let's go to our color tool, and now we can change the color of the particular tracks and the events. So let's say again, come here, select all the tracks, go to my colors, and we can change the colors of the tracks and the events like so. Now, if a particular event, if the event had a specific color assigned to it, so let's say now I come over here and I've assigned the event to that color and I change the color of the track. So if we have highlighted, if we've colored a specific event, that's going to take a higher priority than the event assuming the track colors. So if the event hasn't been colored, when we recolor, so just come right over here to the color palette, and we could just say, I want these all to be green. We can see that this stays the same because this has a higher priority because we have specifically colored that event. But now when we look at our particular tracks, we can see that all of the events that haven't been colored will assume the track colors. And to colorize multiple tracks, select your multiple tracks, come here to the color tool, and then you're kind of all set except for events that have been colorized already. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Okay. So we see Pocket Drummer just saying, what's up, everyone? Can't hear or see anything happening, just a still frame. So let me make sure that we are going on. Hello to the April. Hey, hello. All right, welcome to the just. All right, so let's see if I just want to make sure I'm not. So let me know if anyone wants to send me like a text message. We'll just make sure everything is going through as expected. Okay. Okay, so you see Jazzy saying sound of videos. Okay, all right. So glad you got it sorted. It's my big fear of me talking for 20 minutes and no one being able to hear or see. All right, so we see Reed, Stefan, music. Great to see you on. It says folder tracks and group channels are incredibly convenient. Amazing update. All right, you see the Jazz Dudes linked. Reed, Stefan, music's tutorial videos, Cubase video on Discord. Thanks for doing that. All right, we see Balsa joining from Montenegro. You see Jan giving kudos to Jazz Dude for the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. Jazz Dude shared a link to Reed Stefan's video. All right, so we have a question from Reed Stefan Music. Does Steinberg Studio EQ have low cut slope controls, or is it a fixed filter? I'd love to make it steeper if possible. I've only found it controlling frequency EQ2. All right, so let's come over here. Open up the channel. So let's go to our Studio EQ. All right, so let's say if we come here, we could pick what type of, so when we come over here, so say we want to do, so we could pick, okay, we want it to be like a low shelf filter. I think, let's see. Or let's do just like a high pass. Thought it was on here. Let me just. Thought there was a way of adjusting it. Let me just. And let's see if doing the different. Let me come over, just adjust. All right, so if we come here, so it's not necessarily in the studio, but let's say if we come to like our, so let's say if we come over here, we could choose to make this like 6 dB per octave, so it's, well, not necessarily in the studio EQ, but when you go to the channel EQ, here you could switch this to be, so using kind of the pre-section, and let's just switch this back. When I go over here to show it as knobs, so try, if you go to like the channel EQ, click here to settings. If you go to the show controls as sliders, here you could adjust the slope of the EQ directly here. So when we come over, you can get 48 dB of cut right there. So let me know if that's helpful for you. So again, just go to the pre section and then you could adjust the slope right there. While it's not technically in the studio EQ, it's on every single channel strip. So let me know if that's good for you. All right, Terry Gray says, hey Greg, how can I migrate my Nuendo 14 colors setup to version 15? So colors are generally going to be transferred over directly with a song. So colors aren't necessarily globally based. But what you want to do is, if you have a song that is from your Nuendo 14, if you open up that song, the song contains the colors. Once you have those colors set up, what you could do now is just come over to your project color setup, and where you go to options, once you have those colors set up from your Nuendo 14, you could then, once that song is open, you could go to the project colors setup, and you can come right here to options, and then you could say save the color set as default, and then that should work for all of your Nuendo 15 projects. All right, wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer on. See, Reed Stefan Music says also thanks to the community supporting his first Cubase songwriting session. So thank you for contributing to the content for Cubase. We appreciate it. It's a lot of fun watching the video. All right, so we have Marcos Castro Official saying thanks from San Jose, California. Beautiful part of the country. Thanks for being on the live stream. So John Kutsalinas asks, hi Greg, greetings from the UK. I was wondering if there's a way to assign a new track, audio, instrument, etc. to an existing VCA link when adding it. So, you know, an actual group is kind of more of a destination, but we can think of the VCA as more of a link. So I don't think that if we had a VCA, so let me just come over here, let's add a VCA, that it's going to be something that's kind of routable to in kind of a traditional audio sense. But let's come over here, let's add an audio track. So here we could, you know, do the routing to, you know, directly to, you know, our sidechain inputs or effects or to groups. But when we deal with VCAs, often the VCA is going to be more of a linked. So if I want to send these particular tracks, let's say to, you know, I don't necessarily, you know, VCA doesn't actually pass audio, but when we come here to a VCA, you know, if we right click and we say, let's add a VCA to the selected tracks. So now it's a link and not necessarily, while it kind of seems like, oh, it's just kind of like a group, but a little different. But what it's actually doing is it's not necessarily a separate distinct audio source, but it is just simply a link. So that's why it's, you know, you don't really add to the particular link of a song. So I don't know of a way to automatically add it to an existing VCA, because it's more of a link group. Sorry about that. All right, so we see from Tommy Valen, hi Greg, question, how to make Cubase windows showing all 4 mixed consoles at once. I saw some YouTube video, but I wonder if that is possible. So I think so. It's probably with the Bear McCreary Steinberg Spotlight. So I did get to help with that one because I was stuck setting up for the NAMM show. But if you want to see, I've seen lots of comments on that. So let's say we have mixed console 1, and let's say, if we come here to, our sections, so let's say if we come over here to set up sections, I will just so we can set up one mixer like this. Let me come over. So if you were to kind of mimic Bear's setup, which is pretty cool. And then we set up mixer 2 to kind of do the same thing. And then you could just kind of keep setting up the mixers to kind of keep doing the, and keep them stacked. So if you wanted to, let's see if we come here. So you could just kind of keep stacking and have multiple mixer views open simultaneously. He has more vertical real estate than I do, but let's say if you just want to, but you could just kind of keep stacking kind of mixed consoles on top of each other to see different tracks. That's how you would do it. And I think Bear has it set up on his own dedicated monitor. So let's come over here. We'll set up our sections again here. But yeah, you could just minimize and open up all 4 mixed consoles at once. All right, Tim Boinheimer just says, what should my meters, my LUFS meters look like or be at when I'm setting up a song for CD or WAV file in Cubase? For like a CD, there's no real ideal resolution. What a lot of people aim for in broadcast is going to be minus 23 LUFS, and that's loudness unit full scale. We could make a quick analogy. It's very similar to like RMS loudness. For streaming services, a lot of them, I think, are at minus 14 LUFS. So people will often aim for those. But if it's going to be on CD, people can be, you know, as long as you're not clipping, people can be, may shoot for more, but realize that if you want it to be on streaming, a lot of people kind of aim for minus 14 LUFS for music and minus 23 LUFS for kind of broadcast and post-production. All right, we see Val just asking how everyone's doing around the world. He's in a wet and cold Vienna, Austria. All right, Val's question says, since the last update, all my tracks changed color. When I changed the color of the occurring folder in which they're in, how can I change that back? So go to your preferences or settings. So preferences on Windows, settings on Mac. Go to event display to folder, and then you can just see apply color of folder track automatically. You could just choose never, or when it's with a group channel, always. So just change. So once again, under your preferences or settings, event display, folders, apply color of folder track automatically. Just come right there and change that. You could change it to never, and that will be kind of pre-Cubase 15 behavior. All right, so we see Vikanish Kanian. Hi Greg, any progress in fixing logical editor macros in 15.02? So I don't think that there's been any changes. I mean, 15.02 just hit like a week ago. So I think most of the stuff works if you're triggering it from, I think, from the actual logical editor, but not from like a keyboard shortcut that, or a MIDI remote that actually triggers the logical editors. I know Steinberg is aware of it, but there hasn't been any additional releases since then. Right, we see Reed Staff and Music says, excellent, thanks for the useful EQ tips. So you're welcome. All right, we have Jonesy checking in from Poland. We have Brian Sawyer from Yuma, Arizona. All right, so we have Fine Schliff Music says, hey Greg, a few weeks ago we found an issue with track presets don't copy the fader positions on existing channels. Did you maybe have a follow-up? So I passed it along. I don't think that the behavior has changed with that. All right, so we see Steve Torper just says, brand new user, drinking from a firehouse but learning something new every day. So welcome to the Club Cubase community, and feel free to ask any question. The only dumb question is not asking a question that you have. So we're here to help, and welcome to the family, and we hope to see you on many more live streams, and so you can be part of the community with us. All right, Lunrick asks, Greg, the automation in modulators continues even when playback is paused. Does having VSTs on overload Cubase's resources? So if the instrument, there's a preference. So if the instrument isn't making sound, if the instrument is silent, not if there's activity, but if there's no sound, if you come over here to you can set it up so it doesn't take any processing. So let's say if we go to VST to plugins, we see this preference for suspend VST3 plugins processing when no audio signals are present. So if you uncheck that, unchecking that will allow plugins to always take CPU, whether it's making a sound or not. If it's not making sound, if you just simply have this checked, then that plugin will not utilize any audio performance. So that's a good thing to do. So that way the modulators themselves, if they're not making any sounds, if they're just moving parameters, won't be taking audio performance. You see Tim K is just mentioning drinking from a fire hose is right, but eventually things become to make sense and the recall grows. I heard it takes about 3 years to get real proficient. Yeah, so it's just like learning, to me, it's like learning a musical instrument. You know, if you sat down at a piano, you're not going to be playing Chopin the second day, or you're not going to be playing, you know, Alan Holzer stuff when you get a guitar. You just kind of learn little bits of it, you know, realize that Cubase can do everything, basically, probably that you would ever want or desire. But when, with that level of depth can come complexity and multiple ways of doing stuff. And you don't have to learn the whole program. Just figure out one little thing like, okay, I'm going to learn how to make drums. I'm going to learn how to tune vocals today. If you want to be like really methodical in learning it. But this is a great resource, and check out Cubase Index when you have questions. And we do this for 4 hours on Tuesdays and Fridays every week. All right, Benny Beninati asks, Super Drummer always has a stereo output for each instrument. In Cubase, I'd prefer to have everything in mono except for the overheads. What would be the best way to get the instruments into Cubase? So generally why it's probably giving you a stereo output is because it's going to, the sounds are probably sampled or playing back in stereo. So a lot of times if you hit a snare drum, if it's like an acoustic sample, you're going to have this snare drum that hits in the snare mic. It may hit the top mic, the bottom mic. It may go into the overhead mics. It may go into the room mics. So often hitting one MIDI note can be a combination of mono and stereo. So I don't think you're going to gain any benefit if we have, something. So let's say if we have drums and we have, let's say, our groove agent here, and let's activate like a multi-output for this instance. So we'll come over here. So let's say we'll activate outputs. All right, so we'll come here to our groove agent. We'll open up our outputs. So if you wanted to, you could right here in the outputs. Let me see if this is switchable. You could add, if you really wanted to do it, we could take like this output and, send it to a mono group. But I think, while theoretically you're thinking, okay, the snare is mono, probably what you're hearing is a snare being processed through a stereo sampling chain. So you could see if there are mono outputs on the within the particular instrument, then that would automatically show up here. But you could take these particular outputs and route these to, so let's say I wanted to add a mono group. If you really needed to do that, you could add a group track, and we want this to be a mono group track. So we'll just give this all right, so now we come over here to this groove agent output. So let's say this is where my kick is going. We could now just take this out to the mono group if you needed to. So you could do it, but you'd probably have to send it to a mono group. But again, I think that may change the sound of what the instrument is actually doing. All right. See Michael Teams joining from Weatherford, Texas. Thanks for being online with us today. Great to see you. All right, so we see Val just says, thanks, Greg. Is with the group channel with the new group channel function. So it's where Steinberg did it. I just get to show it to people. It's the smart development team and product planning team at Steinberg that did it, so I won't take any credit for it. All right, Bratman Studio says, hey, Greg, I have a question about LUFS. Back in the day, we didn't have LUFS in recording school. How and why are LUFS a thing, and where they come from? So there used to be, it actually kind of started, interestingly enough, with, there was, I believe the act in the United States was called the Calm Act. And basically people were very annoyed that when they watched TV, that the TV would be at one volume, the commercials come on, and the commercials would be like 12 dB louder than the show, and people would have to constantly adjust the volumes on their remote control because it was just annoying. So it annoyed enough people that Congress actually passed a law with this in the United States called the Calm Act, where because people would measure loudness by peak or by RMS, and we could think of that as like roughly the average loudness. So some people, when they would deliver something, would deliver the RMS to be a little hotter and the peaks to be down, so not as many peaks, and that would cause that discrepancy. So there is no real universal standard. So, you know, if you're doing a decibel, you know, there is no real standard. So maybe about 10 years ago they came out with, I believe it was the European Broadcast Union, the EBU, came out with what they call R128, or a loudness unit. So this way you have uniformity on broadcast, and there's kind of a known reference level, which were easy to manipulate in prior years with different measuring scales. So loudness units, or LUFS, became kind of the new standard. So I know, like, I'm in Washington DC area, and I knew lots of people at the time that were working in mixing shows and editing shows for Discovery Channel, because they were based in Washington DC. So lots of my friends worked at Discovery Channel or did lots of work for Discovery Channel, and all of a sudden they got a letter one day saying, okay, if your music, if the audio you deliver to us goes beyond this LUFS standard, we're going to reject the mix. So they would basically do like an analysis of it, which we could do in Cubase or Wavelab, and if it exceeded the LUFS, they would just automatically reject it. So it really kind of started in broadcast. And then broadcast levels could be a little more conservative than what we usually listen to in music. So many of the streaming services had now adopted or adapted to a higher LUFS standard of minus 14 LUFS. So if you watch TV, you notice that the commercials aren't louder, but if you watch something on a streaming service that isn't broadcast, you can still have level discrepancies of volume between commercials and the actual program material. So it just started about 10, 15 years ago. It was just a way to, you know, not have to constantly adjust. You know, if you looked at that time at everyone's remote control, you know, the volume label on your TV remote was worn off because people would just constantly adjust the volume when commercials. So hence that's kind of carried over from broadcast into typical music delivery as well. All right, so we see from Tim Weinheimer ask, what different options do I have when doing a fade or crossfade on an instrument track? Can I do it like an audio track, or do you have to use an automation lane? So with instrument tracks, you're going to use kind of like an automation lane. So let's say if I come over here and we want it to, take two instruments. Let me go ahead and duplicate this track so we have two to kind of work with. Okay. All right, so let's cut here at measure 10. All right, so let's say if we were just dealing with it when it's in kind of the MIDI stage, we could just kind of come over here and choose to, so let's grab our line tool. All right, so we could have that kind of, fade in as this one, or that the top one fade in as this one fades out. And if we wanted to adjust kind of our Bezier curve, so if we wanted to have different curves, we could just grab kind of in the center here. So makes it very easy to kind of do. But there's no events. Like if we have audio, I could come over here and let's say as we do a crossfade, so if these two are overlapping, I could hit X. Let me adjust preference here real quick. So I won't delete overlaps. All right, so now when I hit X, that will kind of do a crossfade. So if it's rendered as audio, then we see the crossfade. We could double click and edit the crossfade, where we could do the fade in and fade out with different curves. And we could choose to have these not linked. So if we just want to be able to, say, okay, I want this curve for my fade in and I need a different curve for my fade out, we could do that. Or you could have equal gain. So it's going to be kind of visually represented differently if they're not rendered as audio, but you could kind of see kind of the same items here. So let's just go to my automation panel. Let me, just so we could see. So if you wanted to see this in two different tracks, and if it's one track, so let's say if I want to take this, the automation is still going to, so if you, wanted to, generally you could just kind of have the same level of automation if it's on the same track. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Okay. All right, we see that Rick is Bratman Studio suffering from a bad cold. We hope you're feeling better soon. All right. Fanaton asks, hi Greg, is there any way to adjust pre-gain on multiple tracks at once? Thank you. So if we want to adjust, if we look at our events here and we go to the lower left-hand corner, we could adjust the pre-gain on the clip level for multiple tracks. If it's going to be more for, like, let's say our pre-section here. So if we go to like our lower zone mixer and we see gain, so let's say I want to select these tracks and I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option plus Shift, we could adjust the gain right there across multiple tracks as well, just by enabling Q-Link. So if those, for the selected tracks, we can adjust our gain accordingly right there, multiple times. So. All right. Okay, sorry, my chat field jumped. Okay, so we see from the Philipcast asks, will Cubase ever add the option to use one window for plugins like Pro Tools? I feel like it could speed up certain workflows and maybe tempt PT users over to Cubase. So I'm not sure if it's like one window where if we have a plugin and let's say we have 5 plugins on this track where you could just select different plugins. So I know that that's been on user surveys before where people can just, like look at all of the particular plugins. And sometimes some of the heritage of companies that do that is because a lot of companies wouldn't allow you to see multiple plugins at the same time. So where you could just come over here and say, okay, now we're looking at all of my plugins. We go to our Windows menu. And then if we want to close all plugin windows, but if I come here, let's say I have like 5 plugins, and I hold down, I think it's Alt or Option, and click, maybe not there, let me just. But that we could open up multiple plugin windows at once. Thought it was, that was the Option key there. Yeah, or Alt plus Shift, then we could see all of the plugin windows at once, and then you could close all plugins just like that. So let me know if you want it to be kind of nested, or if you just want to be able to see all of your plugins on the track at one time like that, because sometimes you may want to see how gain staging works between plugin to plugin. All right, so we see Stefan just says went to setup in Super Drummer and there are mono outputs there. All right, Lone Rick asks, in MIDI modifiers, when humanizing position and velocity, changing the values isn't reflected in the editor view for each note, but it is audible. Will Cubase implement that? Yeah, so it is implemented. So let's take a look at it. Let's say if I come over here and we have our MIDI track, and let me open up just the in place editor so we can see it. Okay, so let's say we have this, we go to our MIDI modifiers. So the MIDI modifiers, this all is basically processing in real time. So let's say, okay, I want to do, random positions of notes. All right, so when we do this, we may not see it, but if you go to the MIDI menu and we say freeze MIDI modifiers, we can now see that all of those settings have been embedded directly into the events. So, if I come over here and say, okay, let's, randomize velocity, whatever kind of settings that you want. So all you have to do to embed those particular changes in is go to the MIDI menu and freeze MIDI modifiers. Then those particular values will be implemented and kind of burned into the particular MIDI event. So MIDI menu, freeze MIDI modifiers. All right, so Michael Teams has granted my family and myself 1 gallon of Celebration Station ice cream. Thank you for that. I think it's a new flavor. Good job. Hard to come up with new flavors like that. All right, so we see from Steve Torper, had to manually create 12/8 time signature drum pattern by Cubase AI Groove Agent. I assume there are available sample loops in full software version 6.8 or 12/8 time signatures. So yeah, one of the things that you could do, so let's open up just a quick instance of Groove Agent here. So one thing that a lot of people don't know, so let's say if we come over to so if we choose to go to musical, one of the things that you could actually look for, so let's say we come over here, and then you could actually just come over here. So let's say you want to go to time signature. So signature is checked. And if we kind of scroll over, you could see like the time signature of different patterns. So not every company will put that in. 12/8 and 4/4 and 6/8 aren't as popular. But let's say if we're looking for 6/8, you could just kind of come over and type in 6/8, and that will, so you could actually search for the particular drum patterns as well right there. So, but obviously sometimes, not every time signature, if you're looking for preset 12/8 drum loops or drum patterns, there's probably not going to be as many as 4/4. So okay. All right, Beverly Beatty says, hello, Greg. Is a beat designer kind of null and void MIDI under MIDI inserts compared to the new melodic pattern editor? Thank you. So we could say that, I would say that perhaps the new, like when we go to the, the pattern editor, so let's say if we come over to like our drum machine here and we go to the editor, that this might be kind of more of, so Beat Designer obviously has its fans. So a lot of people have used the Beat Designer for years and years. So some of the things that one of the things that Beat Designer can do is actually respond to different MIDI notes to trigger different patterns. So that would be one unique thing with it. So, but when we come up with Beat Designer, a lot of people still use this to program beats, and it's very viable, and people have been using this for, 20 years. We don't take that away, but we can just add and integrate more at a higher level of integration with the new pattern editor. So I'd say that a lot of people that were using Beat Designer have migrated to the pattern editor. Is there anything wrong with running Beat Designer? No, not at all. So you could just kind of come over here, and we could think of this as like a super a super, beat designer plugin, if you will. So, but I think most people will gravitate towards this because it kind of gives you the same benefit of the pattern or the beat designer, but with a little more flexibility. We see from Beverly says, I do EDM style music, so looking to utilize Best from Cubase to help me put steps into bass lines and lead riffs. So I think probably for that I would migrate to the pattern editor for that. All right, so we see from Bratman Studios, says, thanks, Greg, for the LUFS explanation. Very interesting. Also lets you know how old I am and when I was in the record school. I had to read up on how to send my tunes to music supervisors. All right. So we see Pastoral Apologetics. Great to see you back. It says, always with you and excited about new robust improvements, especially the folder track groups. Use Pro 15 to record live symphony performances, produce commercial worship and prog music, etc. professionally. So great. We're happy that you're liking the new version. All right, so we see from Isoneres says, when changing direct out while in solo, the direct out won't work unless you unsolo the solo again. All right, so let's give it a shot. Let's do a new project here quickly. All right, so I'm going to add an audio track. All right, now on this track, I'm just going to put like a test tone generator. All right, so we have signal coming out. We'll spare you listening to a test tone loudly. Okay, I'm going to add a group track. Okay, so when changing the direct out while in solo mode, the direct out won't work. Okay. I'm going to duplicate this track so we could stereo. All right, so let's say I have this soloed. Let's go to my direct. I'm going to send this to the group. Okay. All right. So when changing direct out while in solo mode, the direct out won't work unless you unsolo and solo again. What's probably, is it because the group itself is soloed? So let me just come over here. I'm going to add another group track. Okay, and let's say this group track I want to just bypass that. All right, so we have this. I'm going to put one of the group tracks into solo defeat. So let's say I'm going to hold down Alt and click, so solo defeat. So when I solo a track, this one isn't affected. All right, and again, that's Alt or Option plus clicking. So let's say when changing direct out while in solo, so let's say I'm in solo, the direct out won't work unless you unsolo and solo again. So this is in solo. All right, so let's come over here. So let's say this is in solo defeat. So I come over here, I have this track soloed, so I change, let's say, to stereo out. I'm going to change it to group 1. All right, so we see that that is soloed there. Let's send it to group 2. And let's see if I have to solo and unsolo it again. All right, let me send it to group 1 here. All right, so we're sending it to group 1. So I think it's just because the group track is being soloed, but here we can see that when we solo the track, and let's say if I send it to, group 1, you don't hear it because that is muted when that track is soloed, but holding down Alt or Option and clicking on the solo status, and then enabling it. So let's come here to group 1. Yeah, because I think it's because soloing the track is muting the other tracks, but if that particular track is in solo safe mode, that you won't have to do that. So let me know if I'm misunderstanding that. All right, so we see from Babasai mainly compose orchestral/film score music. Can you discuss some things I could do with MediaBay? I don't really use loops. It seems where most of the benefit lies. What am I missing? So let's say, like, a lot of times, many of us have, it's like, I think Terry Gray had posted something on Facebook. It's like, oh, it's not a final project, though it says final on it. So we may have oftentimes many different types of files. So, obviously it's great for browsing loops, but we can also look for MIDI files, MIDI loops, patterns, track presets, plugin presets. I often just use it for projects. So let's say, okay, if I was coming over here, I was looking for a project, and let's say I want to look on my C drive, I could just come over here and just say, oh, I'm looking for a project called Amos. And now we could just say, okay, I want to only find project files that have Amos Moses or the word Amos in it. And I'm looking for project files that have the word hit. So now we could just come over here and see, particular files, or looking for, this is my favorite preset that I made for violin. I could load up a track preset. I could load up plug-in presets for instruments. So all sorts of good stuff that you could do for like film composition, especially if you have, I know people will have like incremental saves, and they may have like 100 versions, and they go, okay, I want to go back to a project named Amos from Thursday, and you could use MediaBay just to quickly be able to find that, so you're not just scouring through your Finder or Explorer to find project files and stuff like that. Okay. So Tim Weinheimer just says, yes, it's helpful. Okay, Isonaris says how to create a key command, I assume inside the project logical editor that will change the direct output inside the new group folder track. Right, so let's say I have these tracks here. All right, let me just add a few more audio tracks. Okay, so let's say I have these all going to... All right, so now I come here to the folder track, this is going to stereo out. So let's say if I have a stereo out 2 and I want my folder track to go to stereo out 2. Okay, so I could just select the particular track. Let's come over here to the project logical editor. I think we could do this. So we want to transform. We'll say our container type is equals, let's try folder track, and or let's just say property. Maybe I'll just even do it. This is selected. Okay, and what we want to do is go to track operation, connect output, and say to stereo out 2. All right, so now when I come over here, I hit apply. We'll see if this output changes. All right, let me see if we... All right, let me see if I specify it as... Let's see if we have this as... Let's see if we set it to group. Yeah, I don't see, it doesn't seem like it's working. Let's see if we do this. Okay, so we say media type is equal to group, and then you can say track operation connect output to stereo out 2, and then you can save that as a preset. So let's say we save this as a preset here, called April 10th, 2026. Then when you go to your key commands, you'll see process project logical editor preset, and then you'll see April 10th, 2026. Then you could assign a key command to that particular function. All right, we see Randy Lee Music on from Texas. Thanks for being part of the community today. All right, so we see Jason Woods says, hi Greg, many thanks for your hard work putting all these lessons out to everyone. I have a question for you today regarding audio files that have disappeared from my project, Cubase Pro 15. So let me see if there's... All right, so if you have files that are missing from your project. It could have been like maybe it was moved to another location, or if the files, sometimes if you took a file and you imported it, there's a preference or setting that you could use if you get to event to audio, that when importing audio files, that you automatically copy all the files to the project folder. So if that isn't checked, it's usually like a quick dialog box that kind of pops up that says, don't show me this again. So depending on your settings, this would automatically, anytime a file is imported, like a loop, would automatically place it directly into the project folder to kind of make sure that, that all the files are copied into one central location. So if you still think that the audio files are on the system, I think I have a project I could open up that's missing files on it. All right, so now you can see that, it's looking for files in these particular folders. If these, you could browse the folder, you could browse for the file, you could search based on it. You could also go into MediaBay and search. So basically, when you get this message is saying, these files are referenced in the project. We're not seeing them in where we are looking for the particular files. If there's files you don't need and you still keep getting that particular message, one of the things that you could do is just go to your media menu. If all the files are playing back correct, just go to remove unused files, and then when you save the project, that will automatically stop those messages from coming up over and over again. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right. All right, so we see from Tim K, just says the visual options are always improving. I'm grateful for that. I like to spread things out whenever I'm busy working with anyways. So the mixer's thing and the plugins full screen, all great. All right, so you see Beverly Beatty just says, thanks, Greg. Yeah, it makes sense and looks way nicer too. All right, so we have Soul Sound Official saying hi to everyone. Thanks for being online with us today. All right, Roland Sepp says, hi, Greg. I'm struggling to set up the drum machine with the drum and percussion sounds I've selected in Groove Agent 5. Or can those sounds only be selected from within the drum machine? So the drum machine sounds and kits are going to be, aren't going to automatically load into Groove Agent, and Groove Agent presets aren't going to load into the drum machine. The drum machine is a combination of samples and synthesis. It has like fewer layering options, so it could really be kind of like different workflows. While there's obviously a lot of overlap, the presets and drum kits from one aren't interchangeable with the other. All right. All right, so you see a question. All Sorry, my chat field jumped. Okay, so the next question from Conscious Power 6302. Is it possible to reduce the size of the right zone, like really shrink? It's somewhat adjustable, but not really shrink. So we could, and I think that, if you don't want it all the time, you could just come over here and just hide it when necessary. And you could use a keyboard shortcut to do that. But if you're, or to the point where you can't really, if it's shrunk down so much that you can't really do anything with it, I would just choose to hide it. But, we wanted it to be functional as well, so we could extend it out, but that's going to be the smallest that we could actually link. All right. See, Tier Gray says, laughing, just says, yes, it's not final until it's final _ final _ final. And then in parentheses, last one. All right, wonderful to see Alex checking in from Mojave, Arizona. Thanks for being online with us today, being part of the club. All right, so we have Rita Afariat joining from Morocco. Thanks for being online with us today. Welcome. I went to Morocco once, to Tangier. All right, so Giab 86. Hi, Greg. When I record automation, the track displays several parameters instead of just one I just recorded. What's the solution to show only the automation I used? All right, so let's come over to the automation. Let me just check. All right, so if you're in 15, some of the changes that happened, one of them was to, last touch parameter. So we can say show at top and show on next automation track. So it could really depend on what parameter you're adjusting. So while sometimes you're adjusting an EQ, you may be adjusting like EQ on, so let's say if I'm here, and let me just grab my control room here. So if I'm here and I'm adjusting, let's say, I use my mouse wheel to adjust the Q. So I'm adjusting the Q, and so, while that looks like I'm moving kind of one event, I could be moving the frequency, I could be moving the gain, I could be adjusting the Q. So if we just set up my automation track here to reveal parameters on rate, so get to settings. So depending on the parameter, so let's say I'm going to open up my automation here. I'll go to a different track. All right, so come over here to my hi-hat. Let's open up the automation. All right, so while I automate one track here, so I come over here, I adjust. So I'm adjusting the frequency, I'm adjusting the gain or cut. If I adjust the Q by moving my scroll wheel, all of those things. So it looks like I'm adjusting one band of EQ, but it's actually 3 parameters. So let me know what exact parameter that you are in fact adjusting. because sometimes one parameter may be actually controlling multiple parameters. So if you could let me know that, that would be appreciated. All right, Beverly Beatties said made her first macros ever a week ago. That's great. Once you get into macros, they can be addictive and very powerful. But it didn't include cowbell. All right. All right, so let's go back. We see from Eisener, it says, but it'll change to all the groups. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's see if we get it for just the selected group. Okay, so I think we still have. Sorry, old muscle memory habit there. Okay, so this was with let's see if we could. Let me just refer back just to make sure I remember correctly. Okay, so change the direct output in the side with new group. Okay, so let's say we have let's see if we get it with the currently selected one. Here, I'll just start from scratch here. Sorry. Be a little cleaner. Okay, so let's say these are both going to our stereo out. So we have two different so let's get back to the Project Logical Editor preset that we're working on. All right, so let's say we want these to go to stereo out 2. I'm going to select the top one. All right, so they both switched. Okay, so let's see if we get a selected track. So that doesn't seem to work. All right, let me see if I put that condition first. That makes a difference. All right, let's take a different approach. So let's remove that. So we can see when we do groups, we could do them all. Let's see if we could trick it with the So I'm seeing if we hide the non-selected one. All right, so let's say we come over here. Let's see, folder 2. All right, let's see if we could trick it like this. So basically we're going to hide the other channels, do the group change on the track, and then undo the visibility changes. So that's stereo out 2, and that's stereo out 2 as well. I'll pass that along and see if we could have the like a folder group as an option. Let me just try this with a folder instead. See if that makes any difference. And let me just try this. Okay, so we'll try it one more time. So say stereo out 2. So we want this to be stereo out. Try one more time here. Yeah, so I will pass that along as kind of to bring that to their attention. Sorry about that. Okay, so we see from Rick from Batman Studios says, "Hey Greg, video of a lady doing game soundtracks with Cubase. She mentioned she converted her files to Pro Tools because everybody has Pro Tools for final mixing games and video, film use, stems, or it's probably going to be stems, but there's lots of people in games, electronic arts that uses Nuendo. So I've been to many electronic arts. Some of their biggest games are done in Nuendo. All right, so Lunrick says, in the stepping lane, when I increase the resolution from 1/16 to 1/32, my pattern moves to the left. Is there any way to subdivide towards the center while maintaining the created pattern? Okay, so let me just come over here. Let me just add, let's say drum. We'll do this pattern event. Okay, so now we'll go to our editor. Okay, so let's say we have all right, so let's say if I come here, okay, we increase the resolution to 16th to 32nd. So I think if we come over here, so let's say if I do, so I'm going to turn this off here, and let's see if we adjust this to 30-second notes here. And I think there's a way of doing it. Let me just. All right, it says my pattern moves to the left, but I think. All right, so I don't think. So here I can now see the 30-second note. So let's say we go to our closed hi-hat. And I'm going to switch this to 30-second notes right there. So the pattern is staying the same. As the pattern moves to the left, is there a way to subdivide towards this center? So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do. So I just kind of adjusted it here and then added number of steps to be 32 as well. So if this is set to 16, you could create interesting polyrhythms. But try increasing this number to 32 as well. Then when you put in 30-second notes, so try adjusting this, the number of steps, to match the resolution. Let me know if that's what you want to do. All right, Bratman Studio is asking, hey Greg, what is ambisonics? So ambisonics is kind of an open source, spherical, kind of immersive mixing format. So sometimes it's used kind of probably a precursor to Dolby Atmos. So, but it's kind of a freeware, kind of a standard, sometimes used in gaming, but it's kind of like more of an immersive format. See, John Koskin is sending kudos to Jazz Dude, Agent K, and Neon for all their work. So we see from Terry Gray, hey Greg, is there a way to export file information, data, names, duration, etc.? I ask because I'm doing manual cue sheets as I watch the stream. Just take a look in Nuendo, see if there's anything that might do that. So I think if you export, I would try maybe exporting cue sheet. So let's just take a look. Say we'll just do dialogue tracks here. So here you can see kind of starting length. So let me know if that works. You could probably also export as a CSV file. So inside of Nuendo here, if we, like you could export markers as CSV files as well, but check out, see if you could just export it as directly from your cue sheet. Okay, so we see Jackie Barr says, for a song with barely any transients that was not recorded to a click and multiple tempo changes, how would you tempo map? So let me just, I'll import a file that has kind of like some ocean waves at the beginning and see if that helps. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and just do a quick tempo detection of it. So if there, so one of the things that you could do is, if you don't have, so let's say, if you have no transients, but you kind of have maybe a sense of where the beat is falling, if we just come over here to your warp grid, so what this will allow you to do is you could now just kind of come over here and move the measures here manually. So what you do once you're in warp grid is you could move your points directly right here manually to make a tempo map. So what the automatic tempo detection will do is kind of do this for you in an automated manner. But you can just manually, so if you don't have any transients, but maybe there's like some type of pulse where you know where the beat is, you can just come right over here and move the particular move. And what you're doing in essence is moving the measure or the beat around so that you can define the tempo right there. Okay, so we see from class, it says when you activate additional outputs in Groove Agent, they are displayed like they are in a folder. I don't see that in my Cubase 15 Mac. All right, so let's say I come over here, let's add an instrument track. We'll just do a new one so it's obvious here. All right, so I'm going to add an instrument track. We'll do Groove Agent SE. So we add one instrument track. We go to the mix console. Let me just hide my input channels. And now we see one output. So if I come over to my virtual instrument here, I'll just activate other outs. And we'll see that as I activate these outputs, so I'll just come over here. We watch the mixer grow. When we activate the outputs, we'll just see, now I let go, we have now 8 stereo outputs. When we go to our project window, we could click here and just, like we're opening up the automation lane on the instrument that has multiple outs. And now we could just come and take those outputs right there. So that's where we can see them. So they're reflected on the mix console, but they're also directly in the main project window as well. Okay, so we see from Giab86 says, thanks, Greg, you could try pan. So it could depend on the panner. So let's take a look, and I think this is with the automation of the parameters. Let's add an audio track. Let's make it a stereo track. Okay, so I'm going to go to my automation panel, and let's reveal parameters on rate. Okay, so we have that checked. Okay, so I'm going to come over here. Let's adjust our pan. So let's say I'm going to automate so we could see. All right, so we have kind of just a balanced panner. We see one parameter. But if we're on a stereo track and we switch this to a stereo combined panner, this gives us basically independent panning for the left and right channels. All right. So let me just. So if I come here, I move the right channel. So this may show up. Let me just take it off. So in the stereo combined panner, we have a separate left and a separate right control. I can see where that might show up as kind of two different. How, we could, so it could be depending, check to see if you're on, let's see if I move my right panner here, we can see that. So you can see that when I adjust my right panner here, that we could now come over, we adjust our left panner. So we have, so that depending on the actual panner, you may see multiple parameters. So let me know if you see it when you right click on the panner here, if you see it in balance panner, or if you only see it when in combined panner. So we see, hi Greg and everybody, Soren here. Greg, have you any more info on the Yamaha Creator Pass that you can, or can you have it later? I'll see if I can figure it out. So it's kind of being handled by a small group kind of in San Jose area that does kind of, it's almost kind of more of like a think tank. So they don't have a lot of interaction with all the other teams at Yamaha or Steinberg. But I'm trying to, figure it out. So I have a call next week with someone in Hamburg that may know, who's been on vacation for 2 weeks. He's getting back Monday. All right, Soren asks, Greg, is it smart to use modulation and the plug-in volume to create a volume writer and level the audio with it? Can you show a little bit of that? All right, so let me just jump back to... Just revert to this. So I think that generally using like the plug-in volume control may give you cleaner results. All right, so let's say we're gonna have like a guitar part here. All right. All right, so let's say if we want to come over here, let's go to Insert. It's going to be under Tools. You'll see a volume. So we'll go to our modulators here. All right. So, and generally that may not level the audio. I mean, it could, if we come over, we could, you know, but if you wanted it to, like another modulator that you could use, maybe like if you want it to react to other tracks, is maybe the envelope generator, where you could set up a side chain for it. Or you could kind of modulate a compression parameter based on sidechain input. So, so there's some creative uses that you could use for that. But if you let me know exactly kind of what you want to do, like if you want to accomplish something, like if is the volume too loud or not heard, and how to use modulators to solve that. All right, so you see from Gab 86 says it seems to have been fixed by unchecking real parameters on right in the automation settings. So thanks. All right, wonderful to see David M joining from Liverpool. Thanks for joining us. Glad you could join us today. All right, we have Spacer 584 journey from Prague. That's one places I always want to go. All right, reading through. Everyone's happy with Michael Team's ice cream selections. All right, Shredalicious says, "Hey Greg, let me clear my throat." All right. All right. 54 Beatmaker asks, how to double and half speed sample without using time stretch tool. All right. So if we are working with like a loop, so let's say a sample. So let's say if we come over here, let's say, okay, we're going to have, let's go to our loops. All right. So let's come over here. Let's see, it's going to be just samples. Let's find some loops. All right, so when we come over here, we could preview at kind of our normal tempo. So let's say if I drag this over, all right, so we have our normal tempo, and I could just come right over here. So let's unmute. All right, so let's say we listen to this particular track, and now let's say I want that sample to be halftime. In the preview window, I could say let's do 2x, and I'm going to drag that same sample over, and I'm going to do half speed. So it's going to be the same sample, and when I drag it over, we could listen to it at its original speed. Double speed or half speed. So if you're dragging over from the MediaBay, all you have to do is when you go to audition loops, say, oh, what would that be like at halftime? Or double time, halftime. And then depending on this setting, when you drag it in, then the sample will automatically play back at normal speed, double speed, or half speed. So let me know if that would work for you. See, Terry Gray says that's what I'm looking for. Thanks, Craig. All right, UK Leonardo Sants asks, hi Greg, can you show us the use of new ARA Wavelab Go in action, please? All right, so let's say, let me just import a quick audio file here. All right, so I think this is actually a pretty... All right, so let's say I have an audio file. So I don't have the Wavelab Go license since I have a full Wavelab. But let's say we look at this audio file, and like we can see that the left channel is louder than the right channel. So we listen to it. The politics of lust. We were doing things. So you just kind of look at. Our mother's blush. It was a 90-second. So let's say I want to fix that easily. So this is a great use case of using extensions. So let's say, okay, I want to go to Wavelab. And now when I double click on it, we're going to, instead of the sample editor, it's going to launch Wavelab for us. Okay, so let's say, you know, and some of the stuff that we could do is I could actually come over here and let's say I just want to go to process, and one of the things like, okay, I want to, you know, remove DC offset, we get invert phase, but let's go to the pan, and I think, so let's come over here to pan normalizer, and I could say, okay, we want to, you know, go to our peak level, and what we could do now is just equalize out the left and right channels. So we could say, okay, let's analyze the channel difference between the two. So let's say if we undo that, we could say, okay, let's analyze the difference, and we say, okay, there's 0.48 dB of gain between the left and right channels, and now we could just come over here, say let's apply, and now we will have equal levels between the two channels. Some of the other things I think they could do in Wavelab Go, and again I have the full license, so I can't run the Go license and a Pro, is if you click here, so we're used to seeing the left and right, but I could also see like the mid and side. So if I wanted to, let's say now that we have this panned evenly across our tracks, if I wanted like the sides to be louder, I could just select like the side channel. So we're talking, you know, just like the left and right outer edges. And at this point I can say, okay, let's just adjust our gain. I want this to be 3 dB louder in the sides. So as I adjust here, looking up and then glancing away. If we undo that, we were doing things in our minds that would make our mothers blush. It was a 90-second. So undo. You hear how it doesn't sound as wide. If we want to do another 3 dB of gain to the sides. So we could look at, and we could also see, you know, like if we want to see kind of like the overall loudness, of different stuff, or do spectrum editing as well. We have a spectrum rainbow. So this could actually be helpful, like if you have like sibilant frequencies. You'll notice that the sibilant frequencies can be very kind of bright, almost neon yellow in color, but lots of different little editing tasks like this. And you say, okay, I want to make this permanent. We could just come right over here, make those permanent, or just remove the extension. So little stuff like that. Wavelab's a really great little Swiss Army knife for doing some editing tasks that you may not normally have access to from within inside of Cubase or Nuendo. All right, we see Lawrence Koch from Barn Door Recording in Rhode Island. Thanks for being online with us today. All right, so we see from UK Leonard Sants, I just saw VST Live in your file menu. Can you demonstrate the integration between Cubase and VST Live, please? So once you have VST Live, you could import your Cubase project into it, and you could also just simply come right over here and, we could now just, when we come over, we could, export, we could import Cubase projects from it, but we also just come right over here, so we could import media projects and export projects to and from. So if you kind of have like your whole production that's done inside of Cubase and you're taking it to VST Live for kind of more live performance tasks to, have like, the chord track and, have, all of your MIDI information that's in there, you could just simply take your Cubase project and use that as the basis for your VST Live project. All right, so we see Amadeus Solo says, when I close a folder in the main view, the tracks are also hidden in the mix console. Is there a setting to keep them independent? All right, so let's see. Let me just jump back. Okay, so let's say if I'm on my mix console, so we have, let's say, our multi-drums here. All right, so I think that this will always be synchronized with, the lower zone mixer is always going to be synchronized with the channel view. So let's say we have our folder with group here. So when I close it here, we can see that it's closed here. We could also, in the mix console, if we click on the folder, expand that view. But let's say if we go to like our F3 mixer, and if we choose to not sync, so let's say if I'm here in my mixer and I open, we can see that my folder is closed. And opening and closing the folder, if this mixer isn't synced, won't carry over. But the lower zone will always be synced with the particular track control settings, just for that level of integration. So we come here. And I'll just zoom. So as soon as we close that folder, so this view in the lower zone window will always be synced. But if you go to like the standalone mixer and you choose not to sync, which is this little button here, then they'll work and function independently. All right, Brian DeBear says, hey, mash, smash, press, click that like button. All right, so I know we had a couple more questions that were mailed in. Let's get to those. All right, it's kind of timely where we are. It says, hi Greg, on my system now, you can no longer hide the new folder / group tracks using the set track filter type button at the top of the tracks. For example, I uncheck everything, they still show up. Can you check this on your system as well? All right, so as we see, when we come here, if we want to hide, so let's say my drum track within my drum folder here. So I have a multi-drum folder with group. So when I come right over here, we can say, and when we go to, let's say, our settings, let me see if I have this, track visibility. Okay, so we come over here, you know, we see, okay, that we could hide our individual components. So we don't necessarily hide folder tracks, but if my folder track contains audio and I hide audio tracks, it's there. So we could hide our particular, you know, different sources. So say I want to hide my, you know, so we have different, so there, you know, our folder track, if it contained MIDI, we could hide all of our MIDI, we could hide all of our drum tracks. But, you know, if we want to hide, you know, so the folder is containing the audio, so we could hide our group tracks, we could hide our audio tracks, and that would automatically reflect directly what's going on. So it's come over here. So, you know, I can see all my audio tracks that are in the folders. I don't hide the folder. What I'm hiding is the contents of that folder. So I can say, okay, now we're going to hide the audio tracks. We could do that. Now we could also, if you wanted to just close those out, if you go to the visibility here, we can choose to just hide the entire folder right here. So if you don't want to see that folder or the multi-drum, you could just come directly here, hide the folder and all the tracks within the particular folder. So I could just come and select that particular folder here. So maybe use the visibility settings if that's what you want to do. But otherwise, we hide the contents, the different type of tracks within the particular folder from the filter track types. All right, you see. All right, let's get to our next question that was mailed in. All right, and also kind of related topic. Says, hello, Greg. Hope you and your family had a nice Easter. We did, thanks. And also celebrate my son's birthday past Sunday. His birthday was on Monday. Says, I've noticed a problem with the sync behavior between the full mixer and the mixer in the lower zone. My sync settings are as followed. So we'll go to our sync settings here. So all of these are checked. Okay. Okay, so says when I change visibly on a channel in the default position in the full mixer, it's reflected in the lower zone, but if the channel is attached to the left or to the right, it's not synchronized in the lower zone. So I think that when so let's say if I come over here and I want like let's go to the visibility to zones. I think that the zone settings for the mixer are going to be independent of the, so let's say if we come here, we'll just put all these in the center. So so I think that the zones for each mixer, so when we sync, it's going to be like the channel order. But I believe that when we go to our mix console, let's come over, let me activate the left side here, that the zone settings are, well, it looks like it's carried over there. So I thought that this might have been different, but let's say if I have those two tracks over there, and when I come over here, we can see it's just those two tracks. So it seems like it says when I change the visibility on channel and default position in the full mixer, it's reflected in the lower zone, but if the channel is attached to the left or right zone, it is not synchronized in the lower zone. So it looks like that is syncing to me. So if I want to take all of my drums and put them in the right zone, so it looks like this, and we go and hit F3 to open up our mix console, we can see that those are all anchored over to the right there. But I think previous versions may have had these, and I could be mistaken, but these were kind of fixed or independent for left and right zones between the different mix consoles. All right. All right, see if we have any more questions. Let me just check. All right, let's see if we have more questions coming in. Okay, so we see from class, just says I meant the visibility is not synced. All right, so I'll set up a new project here. So I think that, all right, so let's, all right, so let's add 16 tracks. Okay, so let's say I have my visibility here. All right. Okay, so let's say I want to hide. Come over here to, all right, so let's say in this one, I want to hide channels 1 through 8. All right, so we see 9 through 16. Let's come over here. All right, so we see all the channels. Let me check the visibility settings. So I'm just going to come over here. I'm going to sync the project to the mix console here. So I hit F3. And then we see 9 through 16 there. So let's say I want to do only odd numbers. So we have 9, 11, 13, 15. I hit F3. So maybe if you try not to you know, if it's only, try just, I'm not sure if you're using all 4 mix consoles actively, but maybe see what happens if you just do the 1. So let's say if I want all odd numbers here, so do 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. I go to my large mix console. We only see the odd numbers there. So let me know if I'm doing something differently than you are, if I want to see them all. All right. So we have a question. Do I have to use instrument to create a sound, or can I create in some way? So you could record any audio source in. You know, if you want to, let's say if I want to come over here, I'm going to go to an input channel, and let's say on my input channel for this particular track, we're going to say, okay, I want input 1, and what I want to do is I'm going to put on my audio track, I'm going to put just a noise generator. So let's come over here to tools. I'll say, okay, let's get to our test generator. Okay, and I want to put the test generator, let's say we'll just do some white noise, and I'll record white noise into this particular track. Okay, so we have some white noise, and now if I wanted to come over and let's make a sampler track, so we'll say, okay, let's make sampler control and drop that white noise file into the sampler track. All right, so now we can play just some. All right, so this is all kind of just built right in. So let's say, okay, I want to run some filters on it. All right, so let's say, okay, let's come over here and we could, you know, run an LFO on that if we wanted to. So let's say, okay, we want to come over here. So now if we wanted to come over here, let's adjust. And let's go to pitch. So I could come over here to pitch, and let's put in some different. So I will just now come over and so we could adjust some different. So you could just kind of, make sounds from anything, try dropping it into the sampler track, and so any sound. So if you just want to record yourself saying anything or any audio file, just drag and drop, and then we could just start coming over directly to, and let's say, okay, we want maybe different patterns here. As soon as I let go, so all sorts of fun stuff you can do with that. So you don't need to use any instruments. So there's built-in sampler tracks as well. Okay, so you see from Jackie Barr, it says maybe dumb, but I'm trying to change the colors of the whole project area, but no matter what he set it to, it always migrates back to green. Anyway, get more color options or make it stay the color I select. All right, so let's say okay, so let's say if I want to colorize a number of events, I could just select, you go to the color palette here, and you could change kind of all of the color events. So and as we had mentioned before, if we colorize, if we don't have an event colorized, it will assume the track colors if you've assigned track colors to it. And let's say if you want to, let's say if we're here and you want to take a number of tracks, so let's say we duplicate this, all right, and let's say we want to change the color in the middle, so I could just grab kind of my range tool, and now what I could do is, okay, I want to come here, I'm going to hit Shift X, and then we could choose to color those. So now that we've split them to different events, we could colorize those particular selected events like so. So if I want to take just a portion in the middle of that, again, kind of use our range tool, Shift X, and now I want to change the color, let's say to orange. So let me know if that's helpful for you for figuring out your color options. Okay, so we see further clarification from class. Says only channels in default position are synced in visibility. If channels anchored to the left or right, the visibility is not synced. All right, so. Okay, so let's look at our mix console. All right. Okay, so let's take 16 and 15 and anchor those. Okay, so now we'll hit F3. Okay, make sure I'm reading it right. So the channel is anchored to the left or right, visibility is not synced. Okay, so let me adjust the visibility here. So get a visibility. Let's go to track visibility. So say I want 13 and 14 not to be synced. So we're going audio up to audio 12. All right, so we see up to audio 12 here. Those are anchored to the right. We try anchoring one track to the left, say to channel 9. All right, I'm going to go to F3. We see channel 9 is anchored there. I'll hide my input channels. 15 and 16 are there. 13 and 14 are hidden. So let me know if I'm still doing, sorry if I'm being dense and not getting it. But let me know. All right, so we see from Tim K says his cat buddy sometimes sits on the arm of the couch thumping his tail against his side. He's tempted to sample that for drum sound. If I ever get a record made, I'll credit the cat for percussion. One of my friends is kind of my friend Daryl Pearson, a great friend of mine. He was working with Dr. Dre once, and he was asking, he was like, man, how did you get that kick sample? Where did you get that kick sample from for a particular track they were working on? And they're just playing basketball. And they kept passing the basketball back and forth, and Dr. Dre was just dribbling the ball slowly, and he's like, man, where'd you get that kick drum sound? And what they did is he sampled the basketball hitting the floor and sampled that in, and that was the kick sound. So all sorts of very creative stuff like that, you know. So, and if you ever watch, you know, you can watch my friend Robert Dudzik, D-U-D-Z-I-C. Watch his YouTube stuff. He's a sound designer, and you know he's a guy that will go to a junkyard and record all the sounds and just pick up random stuff from, you know, flea markets, anything that kind of makes sounds, and he does this amazing sound design work, and he's done all sorts of like huge projects for films and TV and movie trailers. Watch him work as well, because he'll just, you know, he's a guy that, you know, has a portable recorder with him every time and records like every doorknob, every little sound. I'm sure he drives his wife crazy. She's an incredibly sweet lady. You know, but you know, it gives you a completely different perspective on sound. So take any kind of ordinary sound, your cat thumping their tail, the basketball hitting the floor, anything that sounds interesting, capture it and throw it in and come up with creative sounds like that. So a lot of film composers, when they're starting a project, they'll have kind of a set of unique samples that will always be available for that particular project. They kind of come up with different sounds, and often they'll compose around different samples that they collect just to kind of get a fresh palette of sounds to be inspired from and to use. So be creative with searching for new sounds. All right. Yeah, and another interesting thing, I have a cousin who's a retired attorney, and he just started recording sounds of like his washing machine as it started dying, and you know, he actually got at some point like, you know, 250,000 listens of like different appliances in his house breaking. So it probably helped that his daughter is a music industry social media expert, but interesting that he has a following for sounds of broken appliances. Okay, so we see from class is try to hide a channel anchored to the left or right. Okay, do that. So let's get to track visibility inspector here. Thanks for your patience with that. Sorry, my mouse isn't cooperating with my Mac. Okay, so let's take 15 here. Okay. And all right, so let's hit F3. Okay, so I see that 15 isn't being hidden, even though it's hidden here. But let's say if we do 12, that isn't hidden. That isn't anchored. Okay, so I can see that now 12 is anchored. Okay, I'll pass that along. Thanks for the clarification. Sorry, it took me a while to get there. Okay, so you see from Jackie Barr, says, thanks so much. I'm mainly trying to get to settings, general user interface colors. I try to make it, if I make it black all over, it works. But if I try any other background color, it turns to green. So if you want to email me, like, you know, sometimes when you get into some of the preferences for this, so say we go to like your user interface colors, so say general colors, you know, so there are kind of some, like if you wanted it to be like a little brighter, you know, there's some different color schemes. So, you know, sometimes when you're here, you say, okay, use color schemes, and then you could pick, you know, depending on the color that you choose. So if you want this to be more green, and you apply, so you could kind of change the tint of, you know, accent colors as well, and let's say background. So, but sometimes, you know, as you're working with this, you know, so say, okay, I want this to be brighter. So you can see how that could turn a little more green overall as you adjust kind of the tints. So, and if we want this to be completely white, you know, we could kind of go for a vintage Cubase vibe there. Just kind of will fry your eyes after a while. So, try adjusting some of the settings, but when you go to the background area here, if you're kind of in between, so say if we adjust, so say if we make this, you can make this a little darker without more of a green tint to it. It's when this one is kind of halfway that you get more of your green tint. So thanks for the clarification. Yeah, and Jazz, do you want me to point out for like the track colors, a couple ways to point it. If you hold down Alt or Option key, you could come over here and see the color palette. So if you, again, and I think if you Control or Command, you could just kind of scroll through your colors here using your mouse scroll wheel as well. See, Tim K says, "Oh wow, it's awesome. Dr. Dre sampling a basketball. I have to check out the artist." Yeah. Daryl's worked with. He's kind of the behind the scenes for a lot of people, but he's done, like probably taught a lot to Timbaland, and he's worked with Madonna. I think he did an album with Chris Cornell and Beyonce. Just Jodeci, all sorts of great people. All right, so we see from Negs Reckman, it just says, when I use instruments from the Trip program, they always keep playing because they have a delay effect, but I don't know how to remove that. All right, so let's take a look. All right, so so check here on you have like 8 quick controls. So one of them will be like your delay mix. So let's say I want to shut off delay and reverb. I'll just try different. So check to see if you have these on. So check to see if you have delays on the quick controls. All right, so I don't think. Yeah, so most of the effects here would just be kind of incorporated. So let's say we want to do our delay mix. So as soon as I let go of the key, the sound stops. But if I adjust here the delay, the ARP delay mix, and let's say I want my bass mix here. So check the 8 quick controls at the bottom of your Trip interface here, and you'll probably see a delay mix. And if there's a particular sound that's you can't figure out, let me know. If you let me know the preset. All right, Beverly Beatty just says that sound of howling and sonic is cool. Trip is perfect for EDM. Yeah, so don't underestimate any of the little synths that come with Cubase. There's lots of little gems. That's half of an EDM track right there. So. All right, we'll see if there's other questions that pop in. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone. We'll see if there's any more that come up. Give it another minute or so. Hope that everyone has learned a new tip or trick. And Usually we do these live streams. If you're new to the live stream, we do these on Monday or Tuesdays and Fridays starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern time. So which is 7 p.m. Central European time, 6 p.m. UK time, 10 a.m. Pacific time. So as you just mentioned, you can make monster Moog sounds with Trip. It has lots of oscillators. So yeah, so it's always good. Okay, so we see Briley Music says, can you show how to use chord pads with MIDI ARP? Okay. Okay, so let's say we have Rhodes patch here. All right, and now I want to go to my chord pads here. All right, so we're gonna All right, now on this particular track, what we want to do now is come over to arpeggiator. Let's see if this will take the chord and so I just put like an Apache instrument, like which is in the MIDI inserts, so I can. All right, so say I want to do. So now if we wanted to actually kind of record through that arpeggiator, if you see this little white line here, so as I just move that down, so now when I go to record, so now when I come over here, and now since I moved that line down, the arpeggiator is automatically just getting recorded directly into the project. So again, to do that, we want to go to the chord pads, and now when we do this, we're going to go directly and we trigger our chord pads, but now I put in our Apache SX on. And you can just use those chord pads and trigger it through the arpeggiator, move this line down, and then the arpeggiation's automatically recorded directly onto the part. All right, so we see how to download more instruments. So when you get Cubase, there's lots of instruments that are included with it. Steinberg sells lots of different expansions for Retrolog, Pad Shop, Groove Agent, and Hallian, which all work in Hallian Sonic. So there's lots of instruments that are available. So there's lots of free instruments. So any VST3 plugin is great to use. All right, so we see Roland Stuff says, I nearly forgot to hit the like button. Oops, thanks for the great explanations, Greg. So you're welcome. Thanks for being on the live stream. So it's great to see you on. All right, Bratman Studio says, cool, we'll have to trip out. Have a great Friday. All right, Roland Stuff says, quick question, please, Greg. I've got several takes of an audio rhythm track, and I want to stabilize the tempo. Can that be done to several tracks at once, or must they be tempo corrected individually? So if you have, so let's say if we have multiple files, I'll just take a couple of different songs. So I'm just thinking if I have short segments that are, all right, I'll just import. Okay, so let's say I have 3 different songs and they're all at different tempos. Okay, so I got several takes of an audio rhythm track. I want to stabilize the tempo. Yeah, so what I would do is I think you need to do the tempo detection on one track at a time. So you'd come here and say, okay, and I place them onto different time formats, like, later in time. So go to your project menu. Let's go to your tempo track. So we do tempo detection. All right. Then we'll do tempo detection again. All right, so let's say 3 different tempos on this. So let's just take a quick listen. So this one's much faster. All right, so what I want to do is to select these files, go to audio, and then we go to set definition from tempo under advanced. And now let's say I go to my tempo track, and let's do a new track version. So now I could have these all play at the same tempo. So run all these fast. So now we could have like steady tempos going from one recording. So once you've done the tempo detection for the 3 files, they'll, whatever tempo you have, then at that point will automatically be carried directly over to all of the files. Hang with me just for a second. My laptop powered off. Sorry, my monitoring computer just was unplugged accidentally. I'm going to see if we're still transmitting. All right, so looks like we're still transmitting. All right. All right, just reading questions off my phone. All right. All right, so we see from Briley Music says cool sequences. Is it possible to use user-defined sequences to MIDI ARP recording is nice too. So if you want to just make sure it's still going on. All right, so we'll come over, and once we go to like the MIDI ARP, sorry, just making sure we're still. Just reading questions off my phone. All right. Okay, so when we go back, if we wanted to use our own arpeggiators, so if you use the Arpachi, all you have to do, so we'll come over here to this particular. All right, so I'm going to come over. Let's take a look at this one part. All right. So let's say I want this one particular event to be like an arpeggiator like this. Let me just split as I do this. I want, so when you go to the Arpachi SX, you could take any MIDI sequence. So I'm going to come here. Let's just take that and reverse the MIDI in there. All right, so now what I do is I just drop the MIDI event directly onto the project. And now when I play, so any time that we just come over and we can now at this point just take any MIDI event, drag it to the Arpachi SX, and then we could have that as the basis for your arpeggio. So no problem. Okay, so we see from Chris Higginson, hi Greg, how do I get the chord pads to reflect the chords I'm playing on my MIDI keyboard? All right, so let's say if you want to capture your chords that you're playing, so let's say if I come over here, I'll just let me just All right, so I think if we just click on the MIDI icon here, and I'm just going to randomly, so let's say I think I'll click here. Now when I play a chord, it will automatically capture the chord that I'm playing on my keyboard. So I'm just randomly throwing my fingers down. So click on the MIDI icon here, and then you could play the chord, and it will be captured directly there. So turn on the MIDI icon there. Never thought I could play an A flat augmented 11th, sharp 11th, 13th chord, but you know, just throw your fist on your MIDI keyboard, and now you can have you could be a genius avant-garde composer. Just throw something on your MIDI keyboard, see what notes appear, and then you can write a song based on that particular chord progression. We see Jazz Dude posted some link for free instruments, including Xtreme. All right, so we see from Roland Steps says, great idea, Greg, putting the 3 songs on the same track to tempo correct together. I hadn't thought of that. I had them on separate tracks. So, yeah. See, great comment from Jazz Dude. Says, no joke, I assume. I know maybe 15% of Cubase's capabilities. Think out of the box, and Cubase is the tool you need. All right, so let's see if there's other questions that sneak in. Thanks for all the great questions today. If you've learned something new, or if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. All right, so we see from Beverly Beatty, just says thanks for sharing the chord pad MIDI input. So you're welcome. You see Jazz Dude says he uses a 16 button beat step for chords. It's a great way to do it as well. All right. Give it just a little more time, see if more questions come in. You know, it's a nice spring Friday. All right. Give it another minute or so. If not, we'll wrap up. And if you haven't updated to Cubase 15, if you're waiting for the sale is going on as we speak, so 30% off. So take advantage of that if you're upgrading or jumping to Cubase. Okay, Michael Teams, wishing everyone a happy, safe weekend and make some great music. See, Briley Music just says thanks for your time. Thanks for being on the live stream today. We see Jazzy Lamel. It says, hey, Greg, so I hope you're doing well. Thanks for being on with us. Great. Wait just a little bit longer, see if more questions pop in. Jazzy wants everyone to learn like MIDI inserts and MIDI modifiers and combine them to have endless options. All right, well, it looks like we are out of questions for today. I want to thank everyone for the great questions and hope that everyone's learned some new tips and tricks that they could use in their music production. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll be back on Tuesday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. With that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Everyone, please, we'll see you back on Tuesday, and everyone have a wonderful weekend. Take care. Goodbye.